Hello everyone, John Jacobson here again, giving you what is going to probably be my final YouTube posting for these sessions. Just want to let you know that you're going to be seeing me on a little bit of a different camera angle here, talking to one of my friends, and his son is a stagecraft major at Kent State, I believe, amongst other things. I think he's actually applying for a double major. But anyway, I want to just shout out to Connell and thank him very much for the suggestion. I will say that the only reason you're seeing me from this angle now is because of a chair, a box of matzah bread, and some blue tape, right? Not duct tape, blue tape. So if this thing falls, I'm going to have to make a mad dash to grab it, because if I don't, it's going to break the screen. And either way, it'll be my last posting. So anyway, I just wanted to go over again in this time of national and worldwide crisis. One more thing. Before we get there, I just want to go over, reiterate some of the things we were talking about prior. In the first posting, we talked about the velocity of the virus, how if this thing has an transferability rating of 6, I believe they call it the R naught factor, this thing really has spread far and wide. That's the difference between 2 times 2 times 2 and 6 times 6 times 6. Okay, so this thing really, if it's got a high factor, it is just spreading fast and furious. Like a prairie fire, really, is what I would liken it to. Some of the facts that I would give you is there is a nursing home near here. Actually, it's about 15-20 minutes away in Andover, New Jersey. And it broke out there. Devastating effect. Obviously, these people are probably in their 90s with multiple morbidities, okay? Still doesn't make it fair, still doesn't make it right, but how does a place that's on lockdown already get that many people infected and that many people succumbing to the virus? Okay, so, the virus doesn't just say, oh, look, there's a guy that works in this nursing home, let's get him, and so we can get into that nursing home. That's not how the virus works. The virus has to be well saturated in a community before it finds that person to get in there. And then, even then, okay, with all the lockdown procedures and with all the sanitary procedures, it still ran rampant in there. So that's just my little sage advice, that maybe this thing is a little bit more widespread than we're giving it credit for. Which means, hopefully, that we're well on our way to socialized immunity. I don't like the term herd immunity. It just sounds a little odd. The second thing was statistics. We talked about how we can cook the books to make anything look good or bad. We talked about Babe Ruth. My sister wanted to talk about Mickey Mantle, who I guess she had a little bit of a crush on back there in the 60s. But yeah, we'll throw Mickey in there too, the mixture. But if we went back in time and we were able to give Babe Ruth steroids, and HGH was that human growth hormones, and allow him to play for, what was it, 8 more games, because I think it was 154 games back then as compared to 162. What would Babe Ruth's statistics look like, okay? Well, first of all, he would have looked like King Kong. He looked like Mighty Joe Young pre-steroids, so he would have looked like King Kong, and they wouldn't have called him the Sultan of SWAT. They would have called him the Sultan of Smash. We talked about what Bonds' season home runs look like prior to his steroid use and performance-enhancing drug use, and say he had 25 homers, and after that he was having 60 homers or whatever. So we're just saying we'd just bump it up 100%. That means Babe Ruth would be hitting 120 home runs per season. That just doesn't sit well, and you really lose integrity when you try to make numbers work where they don't fit. Classic example, our country is inflating the numerator and deflating the denominator. As far as I know, we're the only country that's doing that. Fine. If that's the way you want to do it, that's fine. But you have to compare like to like. From what I heard, Chile, and this is a little scary, is counting dead people as recovered. Why? Because they can't transfer the disease anymore, right? They're dead and buried, so they must be recovered. They can't transfer the disease anymore. So it just goes to show you how different countries categorize different things, and you really have to look at the statistics, because statistics don't lie, people lie. Case in point, if you look in the Worldometer website, you'll see that there's a huge spike. I don't know, I think it's around April the 14th or so in our country, 6,000 plus deaths, but most of those were recorded from New York City, which decided to record 3,000 or 4,000 more deaths because they were suspected COVID deaths, but they were never proven COVID deaths. So, if you want to go back and do that, fine, but you got to do it for everything: H1N1, avian flu, SARS, MERS, the flu influenza outbreak of 1918, all that stuff. So people see through that. It's very transparent. If I was going to trust a country's stats, it would be Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Israel. I would go by them. And yes, I know that in our country we have a lot of people who are diabetic and et cetera, so on and so forth. There are a lot of people who are on death's door. Like I told you, my mother had cancer, and they told us that if she got any kind of respiratory illness, that would have been it for her. But, again, she was only given 3 to 6 to 8 months to live. And she did live them out. But any little thing could have nudged her into the grave at that point. And I think we all know that's the way these things work. So that's from the statistical point of view. We talked about how the virus suits some countries rather than others, specifically socialist countries, and how a socialist country might want to hedge against the Malthusian prophecy, okay, of too many people, not enough food. And you look at the Hong Kong uprisings, and you can kind of see maybe how the hierarchy in the Communist Party of China might get a little scared and want to have a hedge, that in case things get too out of control, you have an oops scenario. I personally don't believe that this was intentional. I mean, it was intentional that they were researching it, obviously, but I don't believe that it was an intentional outbreak. There's abundant evidence that the people who did make the mistake through negligence or incompetence, the people who did make the mistake tried to get out there, tried to ring the alarm bell, but, news organizations like Bloomberg, I tell you, I'm really just, my opinion rating of Michael Bloomberg is just dropping like a lead balloon. He just, from what I understand, he was one of the few news organizations in China that had the slightest bit of autonomy for various reasons. And apparently people from Bloomberg were on this. They had the information, and it was squashed from the top down. Squashed from the top down. There's ample evidence to prove that the Bloomberg media organization squashed all this information early on in December when it really could have had meaning. I think there was a discussion in England that they said that 95% of what's happening now could have been mitigated had everybody jumped on this from the very beginning. But of course, communist parties really don't want to let these type of things out, like Chernobyl, right? It's an embarrassment, and it really makes them look poor. So you can understand why they swept it under the rug. That's just the way these political organizations work. But in the long run, the truth comes out. Let's hope. So that's the last thing that we discussed. Finally, and this is really just all these talks that I've been giving have been wanting to get to the conclusion, which is the economy. We've been through this before. There's an old saying, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat its future. I graduated from Ithaca College, and they asked for a donation, and if you made a certain donation, you got to write something on a brick, words of wisdom, impart my legacy to some brick on some walk, some esplanade there at Ithaca. And what I wrote was, remember your past, lest it be your future as well. Remember your past, okay, because you don't want it to be your future. You want to learn from your mistakes. My father used to say, if you learn from your mistakes, it's a lesson well learned, no matter how bad the mistake. We've been through this before, okay? 1918, massive influenza outbreak. Tens of millions, they even say maybe 100 million people perished from this outbreak. Granted, they don't have the therapeutics and the inoculations and the vaccinations and the care that we have today. So I'm sure if you applied all that, those numbers would have come way down. However, really bad situation, okay? What do you have after that? Hyperinflation from the Weimar Republic, right? In Germany. Everybody knows about it, okay? So you have hyperinflation due to war reparations that Germany was to pay. And they just started printing money, right? Everybody knows that. That's a fact. What do you have after that? Okay? You have the Great Depression, the rise of Nazism or nationalism in Europe because people are dirt poor and they look to a demigod to drag them out of it. And then you have World War II. I hate to say it, but you could say we're following in the footsteps right now. What have we done to remedy, a knee-jerk reaction, remedy the situation that's going on now throughout the world, actually in our country? Well, we've passed spending bills that nobody can even wrap their head around. As it stands right now, it's $2 to $3 trillion of debt being issued to carry us through 6 months. I hope you people know how the economy works. Alexander Hamilton was a very smart man. He came out and he said when the fledgling United States of America came to be, that the way to really get the economy going was to do what? Was to print money. How do you print money? Well, you have to back it with something. You have to back it with bonds. So what do? You say, give me $60 now, and in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever the issuance of the bond is, you say, I will give you $100. Okay, well, it could be $600 and $1,000. It could be $600 million and $1 billion, all right? Obviously, they didn't have that kind of cash back then, but they do now. So up until now, actually up until TARP and quantitative easing, many countries around the world, even moms and dads and aunts and uncles would give you Series E bonds, remember those? And that's how you would finance a debt. You would get other people to pay you money now with the promise of paying them more in the future. That's how Treasury securities are dealt with. Well, during the TARP program, which was very much needed, people started saying, I don't know if I trust the United States to be able to pay this back. They have hundreds of trillions of dollars of unsecured liabilities. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, just to name a few. Okay, there are a lot more than that. So countries and companies and people started saying, I don't know if the United States is going to be able to pay this back. So from what I understand, there was a little company set up in Belgium somewhere, probably Brussels, that started buying U.S. treasuries like crazy. Nobody knew who they were. They operated under anonymity, say that 5 times fast. And it was speculated, and I think even proven, that it was the Federal Reserve. We were buying our own debt back. Well, got to borrow money from somebody, so who are you buying it from? Future John, okay? Well, it's not really me, but it's our kids and our grandkids, isn't it? So, bring us to today. Well, TARP and quantitative easing is nothing compared to what we're spending today. Nothing. And our debt is larger than ever, almost exponentially so. They didn't even go through the process of setting up a proxy in some rinky-dink nation to start buying our own debt back. They didn't have the time. So we are actually buying our own debt back because nobody wants it. The only people who are buying our debt is us. Now, I don't know if you know what kind of scheme that is, but I'm making the symbol right here in front of me. It's a Ponzi scheme.